Hey class, this is Katrina Berg, and this is your week two resource video. I'm going to go over some key highlights from the chapters that you're reading this week, and let's get started. So, for chapter five, I want to make sure that we understand personality, how it's measured, how it influences organizational behavior in the workplace. So, personality, as defined, is the sum total of ways in which an individual reacts and interacts with others. These are measurable traits that a person exhibits. And often, companies will do workplace evaluations, personality tests to see if how much of a match you are for that particular job and position. For example, if you were an extrovert, but you are working in an accounting department, would that be the best fit potentially, as you'll be working a lot with numbers independently versus being able to go out and speak with others? So, again, just a very broad stroke consideration, looking at how you're going to react to certain situations and workplace events. Myers Briggs is probably the best well known personality test, and it is based on extroversion versus introversion, sensing versus intuition, thinking versus feeling, and judging versus perceiving. So, if you've had that test, you're probably familiar with what your outcome is, and based on that. There's another model that is out there called the Big Five, and they focus on personality traits such as agreeableness, extroversion, conscientiousness, emotional stability, openness to experience. And that's the Big Five model. There's a theory that is called situation strength theory, and that indicates the way personality translates into behavior depending upon the strength of the situation. There are four elements that impact that include clarity, consistency, constraints, and consequences. So, again, be aware of personalities, how those are evaluated at the workplace, how you can use that as a manager, and also working within groups and individuals. Let's talk about values now. So, values are something that we hold dear. We can also prioritize our values based on our value system, those that mean the most to us and we have the most intense strengths about. These are convictions for us. And finally, let's move on to chapter six, where we're going to talk about perception and decision making. So, perceptions. This is the process by which individuals organize and interpret sensory impressions in order to give meaning to their environment. Perceptions are something that we do intuitively sometimes. Our brain may not even consciously recognize that we're doing it. So there can be errors and biases in that. Shortcuts that sometimes are used in making judgments about others include selective perception, halo effect, contrast effect, and stereotyping. So, again, be aware of what you're doing subconsciously as well as consciously. We do make judgments about others. Ethics. This should be an underlying theme throughout the course, how ethics impact organizational behavior, group decisions, and our own decisions. One ethical theory of thought is utilitarianism, which is based on the greatest good for all. Behavioral ethics is another emerging trend in today that is happening and looking at analyzing how people actually believe. There's more in your books about this. Again, I just want to highlight, don't forget about ethics as we're discussing everything that happens in organizational behavior. Moving on to chapter seven, I want to talk about motivation. Motivation is really the process that accounts for an individual's intensity, their direction, and persistence of efforts towards a goal. And often you'll hear managers, organizations talk about how can we motivate our staff, how can we motivate our employees. Maslow's hierarchy needs is just one way, one theory of how that question can be answered. And to recap what that theory is, you're looking at meeting the physiological, which is hunger, thirst, shelter, safety, which is affection and belonging, social, which is affection and belonging, esteem, self respect, autonomy, and self actualization, which is growth and self fulfillment. So, to recap, Maslow's hierarchy of needs is looking at physiological needs, safety needs, social needs, esteem needs, and self actualization. There are other theories in your books, which I do encourage you to take a minute to read and understand what these mean. This all falls under motivation and how to engage with your staff, how to ensure job satisfaction. Talking about job satisfaction, this is, or let's move on to job engagement, excuse me. Job satisfaction is the happiness of what you're actually working in, what you're doing, whereas engagement is the investment of an employee's physical, cognitive, and emotional energy into job performance. So, making sure that you're 100% engaged, and if not, why? Are you on autopilot, for example, for a day? How can a manager, how can the company help engage you fully? Moving on to chapter 8, which also talks about motivation, but is looking more at job characteristics. There are 5 core dimensions that are defined early on in your chapter, which look at skill variety of the job, task identity, task significance, autonomy, and feedback. Jobs can also be redesigned potentially to better engage employees and staff and increase job satisfaction. So, job rotation is one example of a redesign, and this looks at such things as cross training. You're doing similar tasks and activities, but maybe in a different department or different area. There's also job enrichment, which is talking about increasing the control of what you're doing, control of the planning, execution, and evaluation. Finally, let's talk about extrinsic and intrinsic rewards. For some employees, intrinsic matter, and for some, extrinsic matter. So, intrinsic is recognition. It's saying job well done. It is getting maybe a plaque on the wall or your name on a plaque. For some employees, this matters. For others, they're looking more for extrinsic, which would be pay, for example, or compensation program. So this is a broad overview of the chapters for this week. Please, as I said, do go back and look at the different theories that are out there on motivation. And if you have any questions, let me know. Thanks, class.